The Income Store live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Pompous little twit. That is the description that Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, offered of, well, you know. We have AOC.
Okay, so many sweet potato cubes. Yeah, everyone, I'm making chili. Someone said, please explain the Green New Deal. Thank you for asking. So the whole premise of the Green New Deal, we're screwed, is that on climate. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you, on climate. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you. If we do nothing, there is no hope. Period. That's just a principle across the board. If we do not act, there is no hope. The only time we can hope is when we act. But when it comes to climate in particular, we're actually screwed. There is a global threat to the planet. A global threat. And at this point, we don't even have to prove it. Just walk outside in winter in a lot of places, and it's either way worse than you're used to or way warmer than you're used to. Hurricanes, storms, wildfires. We are dying now.
Quad air demonstratum, right, Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace, who joins us now. Anything more to say on the topic, Patrick?
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Boy, she's not exactly the sharpest tack in the drawer, is she?
Well, that's what you're suggesting, but she said, look, you don't have to prove it anymore. All you have to do is look outside. I looked outside. I don't know what I'm supposed to see. I guess the sky falling. I don't see it, but she says it's there. It's happening. So what are we to say to such a compelling scientific argument?
Well, I guess I could counter by saying I'm looking outside at the Beaufort Mountain Range on Vancouver Island, covered in some snow, and it's totally forested with beautiful trees, and there's a glacier just over to my right here.
I want to be where you are.
Which hasn't melted yet. And in the ocean, there are about 20,000 birds here. It's a migratory route for ducks and geese and all kinds of birds, and it's a gorgeous morning. And the planet looks quite well here, actually. And I guess if you live in the center of Manhattan, you get a little bit jaundiced in your understanding of what the world looks like. But most people don't realize that only about 2% of the land is covered in cities, and the rest of it generally has something growing on it.
Yeah, but think about how much nicer it would be where you are if we eliminated air travel.
Yeah, that would really cut down on the noise pollution, all right. We get about one plane a day going over here, actually. In the summer, though, we have quite a bit of air traffic. I kind of like being able to get out of here on a plane once in a while. I'm doing that next week, going to D.C. and down to Miami to see some friends. And it would be a long walk from here to Miami, I can tell you that.
Well, are you surprised, though, at how many Americans are buying into this bull jive of hers?
Well, I don't know exactly how many Americans are buying into it. The Sunrise Movement, which is really what's behind AOC, she's just a front, as far as I can see. She's quite an attractive-looking front, and she can at least string a couple of sentences together. But it's the Sunrise Movement that is behind her with this Green New Deal. They're the ones who drafted it. And I don't know who's behind them, but they kind of remind me of Occupy, kind of an Occupy reborn. And they say that 81% of the American public supports the Green New Deal on their website. There's no indication of who did the polling, but obviously that is a lie. I mean, I can't imagine that they have any valid indication of 81% support. So the whole thing is phony. And I just don't understand how so many actual members of Congress, 89 members of the House, and I think it was 11 members of the Senate, have joined in this thing, which says we're going to phase out fossil fuels in 10 years. And but that's they've been talking about that stuff for a long time. What really bothered me and what caused me to describe AOC as a pompous little twit was when she tweeted that thing where she said, "I'm the only one that has a plan to solve this problem for the world. So therefore, I'm in charge, and the rest of you are just in the cheap seats."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that indicated a bully. And I really don't like bullies because they are a bad element in society. And the left in general and the Green movement in general have taken to being bullies on this subject. So that's why I made that tweet.
Well, but I mean, in her defense, you had your chance. We all had our chance before she came along to address this problem because, as I understand it, the science is settled and the debate is over. And so since we didn't take the opportunity to do something about it before her arrival, she's going to do so.
Yeah, well, actually, I guess, it's a good thing Einstein isn't here to judge her character. But it's really crazy. This whole thing about the science being settled. On the one hand, these so-called climate scientists tell us the science is settled and we must not allow anybody to speak on this subject anymore. No more skepticism, no more denial as if we're denying the Holocaust. But just a minute, aren't scientists supposed to be skeptical? Isn't that one of the main bases of investigation and discovery, is that you're skeptical? Yes, it is. But the main point is, if the science is settled, why are all these people asking for more grant money to study climate science more? What is there to learn? I thought we knew everything already. So why are billions of dollars being spent by the politicians to continue to have this scare story stoked like a fire? It's enough to drive a sane person crazy. But the fact of the matter is, if we went along with this Green Deal, it would be basically a suicide pact for the economy and hopefully for the Democratic Party if they're crazy enough to buy into it.
Well, what is the biggest scientific lie that is being told to provide the foundation for the scaremongering?
The biggest lie is that carbon dioxide, which they love to call carbon so that people think it's soot, carbon dioxide, which is an invisible trace gas in the atmosphere, they're saying it is pollution. And they succeeded under Obama in getting the EPA to find that CO2 was an air pollutant, when in fact it is the primary source of all life on Earth. CO2 is the source of all the carbon in all carbon-based life, which is all life. So they are taking the most important source of life, which is the carbon in carbon dioxide. That's the only place life gets carbon from, through photosynthesis, combining water and CO2 in the air and in the oceans in order to make sugars, which are the source energy for all life on Earth as well. And so they've managed to make carbon dioxide into a poison. I have a new essay I've just written. It's called 12 Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. And in it, I postulate that if you look at most of these extreme environmental scare stories, they are almost all based on something invisible or extremely remote. The extremely remote category is the polar bears. Who can go to the Arctic and count the polar bears except for a couple of scientists on government grants? And the fact of the matter is, polar bear population has grown from 6,000 to 25,000 since an international treaty in 1972 which stopped unrestricted hunting of polar bears. The polar bears are not only perfectly fine, the Inuit people, what we used to call Eskimos, the Inuit people who've lived there for thousands of years, have had a conference and produced a study showing that there are now too many polar bears, and yet the polar bear is still being used as a symbol of the end of the world. Well, carbon dioxide is invisible, and that's why it's easy to make up stories about it. But the fact of the matter is all the trees on all the hills and all the food crops on all the farms and all the fish in the ocean are depending on carbon dioxide as their source of life. And that is the biggest lie.
What about a lot of people keep saying we've had one of the worst winters here that since I can remember. It's been we've had the polar vortex and it's snowed more than it has. And they're blaming that on climate change.
Well, it's supposed to be global warming. I mean, carbon dioxide is the centerpiece of this whole thing because we're burning fossil fuels. And when you burn fossil fuels, the two main things that are emitted are water and carbon dioxide. Those are the two things that made the plants, that made the coal and oil and gas in the first place. So we're just emitting carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere that was taken out of it by the plants millions of years ago and got trapped in sediments and turned into fossil fuels. So that it's ridiculous to say that the cold is being caused by climate change.
Okay.
I mean, that's why they changed it from global warming to climate change. Now all they talk about is the weather, of course, when they used to tell us, no, that's just the weather. Don't tell me about the weather. We're talking about the climate. That's different. Now they just talk about weather and extreme weather events. Now Bernie Sanders is blaming the tornado that happened the other day on climate change, when in fact there is no trend increasing in extreme weather events in the world. Even the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change agrees with that, but that doesn't matter to the extremists. They just carry on saying every extreme weather event is caused by climate change. These cold winters, last winter and this winter, and this whole climate vortex, which was an invention of these people in the first place, nobody ever talked about a polar vortex before. So the truth of the matter is the sun is in a very low state. There is a grand solar minimum coming and is already underway in the sun, and this reduces the amount of radiation that comes on the Earth. So we may well now be going into what could be a fairly lengthy, like decades, of cold weather or cooler weather. I never claim that I can predict the future of weather, but a lot of people have been predicting this. It's definitely a period of low solar activity. The sunspots have basically disappeared from the sun. These are 11-year cycles that have been known since Galileo. And many people believe that these grand solar minimum events, when the sunspots disappear for decades at a time, such as the Maunder minimum around 1700, was the peak of the Little Ice Age, as it's called. So we may expect to have colder winters now for some time.
What is going back to the number of people that have credentials, that have titles, that are affiliated with prestigious universities, who propagate some of what you're describing as lies, who ignore data models that are inaccurate, proven to be inaccurate. Judith Curry, who's a climatologist, said climatology is becoming increasingly dubious science serving a political project. The policy cart is leading the scientific horse. Is that's what has happened here? Is you have people that are otherwise scientists, credentialed scientists, serious people, but they've decided to pursue politics and maybe some fame and fortune along the way rather than science?
Well, yes, there's a lot of money involved in this whole situation, Dan, like billions of dollars. And most of the scientists who are promoting this catastrophe theory about climate change are on taxpayers' money. They're not being paid by GE or 3M or one of the big corporations who would not spend money on science unless they thought something useful might be produced. The people who are being paid by politicians to do this climate science are basically producing fear. That is the main product of their research. And fear is how you control people. It's been going on for thousands of years. You create an artificial crisis to scare people. Doomsday is coming, the end is nigh, the apocalypse. It's been going on forever. And there's always been a class of people who use the impending doom and the coming apocalypse as a way to put fear into the hearts of the citizenry and thereby control them and get them to vote for them and get them to obey them. And that is what's happening here. And that's why it's a left-wing phenomenon, because the left is into control. The right is more into individual liberty. And the balance between those two things has been going on since the beginning of time.
He is Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace. Patrick, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Nice to be with you, Dan.
Have a good day. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson.